West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Mark, in the past few weeks, the RNC has filed 3 new lawsuits, 2 in North Carolina, 1 in Michigan. Before we get into the details of these lawsuits, why are Republicans targeting those states?
Because they're swing states, right? We know why they're challenging these states. Why are they filing so many lawsuits in Arizona? Why are they changing the rules of the game for certification in Georgia? Why are they out of their mind nervous that the Pennsylvania Supreme Court may uphold a recent decision to count undated and misdated ballots? Why do they keep attacking voting in Wisconsin? Because these are all swing states, right? Nevada, why do we see the Republicans file lawsuits in Nevada? Because all of these states are the states in which the presidential election are going to be decided. So when you look at Michigan and when you look at North Carolina, you see 2 states that are critical to the path for victory. In Michigan, it is one of the blue wall states, along with Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, that if Kamala Harris wins those 3 states, she's the next president of the United States. You can take that to the bank. And in North Carolina, where all of a sudden Donald Trump is playing defense. And let me tell you this, if Kamala Harris wins North Carolina, it is game, set, match. We're talking about a landslide electoral college victory. And Donald Trump is trying to stave that off in a state that is quickly closing against him.
And it's not just the presidential election in North Carolina. There is a tightly contested governor's race this fall. Michigan has a major Senate race. So it's not just the White House on the line here. It is also Congress. It is also the governor's mansion, Mark. But let's start talking about these North Carolina cases. Republicans have filed 2 of them, both of them having to do with voter registration and the voter rolls.
Yeah, so both were filed in Wake County, which is the county for the seat of government. It's where Raleigh is. And the first one of these claims that there are non-citizens on the voter rolls that need to be removed. They are claiming that the North Carolina State Board of Election has not enforced a rule that has to do with people being called for jury duty, and when they are excused for being not a citizen, they need to be removed from the rolls. The State Board of Elections says the RNC doesn't know what the hell they're talking about and has this wrong. My money is that the State Board of Elections is right, because the RNC usually doesn't know what it's talking about and is wrong. And also, the RNC likes to demagogue on this issue that involves virtually no voters. The second lawsuit actually involves potentially a lot of voters, right? It is challenging essentially 225,000 voter registrations. And what it is claiming is that prior to December of last year, that North Carolina used an application form that did not inform voters that a driver's license or social security number was required. They claim that that the state processed 225,000 voter registration applications without collecting this information. And as you might imagine, their remedy is essentially to purge 225,000 otherwise lawful voters because of what they say was a screw up in the form by the state, right? So they're not claiming the voters did anything wrong here. They're claiming the state did something wrong here. Again, this is going to be hotly contested on the facts, but it says a whole lot about the Republican National Committee that in the first case, they want to demagogue an issue that involves almost no voters. And in the second, where they don't really have anything to claim negatively about the voters, they just want to kick people off the rolls. Kudos for the DNC for intervening in that second lawsuit. My law firm has represents some plaintiffs who are intervening in the first lawsuit, and we will see where those two cases go.
Mark, and what's also interesting about these cases is that Republicans have chosen to file their lawsuits in state court as opposed to federal court. What's your take on that?
Yeah, so they filed these cases in state court because the state courts have flipped at the state Supreme Court level, have flipped from a majority Democrat to a majority Republican. And I use those terms, those party identifiers on purpose because North Carolina Republicans in the state legislature mandated a few years ago that state Supreme Court justices run for election in partisan elections. Previously, they had been nonpartisan elections. And in one of these head-scratching moments, other than for sheer politics, the Republicans forced the justices to run with partisan identifiers. So it is now a 5-2 Republican court, and it has proved itself to be pretty hostile to voting rights in the rulings it's had so far. So, they have filed these cases in Wake County, which actually has a very reasonable set of trial judges. So I don't expect they're going to get very far at the trial court level in these cases. But I think they filed them in state court because they're going to try to quickly get these cases run up the flagpole to the state Supreme Court, where they think that given the partisan advantage they have on the bench, they may be able to get some purchase in these cases there.
The RNC in their own lawsuits has been saying that these problems have existed for a while now in North Carolina. Why are they suing now? Why file the lawsuit in August 2024, 2 months before a major general election, when by their own standards, these problems have allegedly existed for months, if not years?
Yeah, so, Judge Moskowitz, I hope you asked that question of them, right? Because I mean, all we ever hear about from Republicans and from a conservative U.S. Supreme Court is the so-called Purcell principle, the idea that you can't wait until right before an election to bring election litigation because it can affect how voters, what their expectations are. It can make it harder for the administration of elections. And there's also something called latches, which is that you can't wait for a problem to develop without challenging it and then later claim that this problem got really bad. So the question of why Republicans should be allowed now 2 months before the election to prosecute these cases before the state courts to disenfranchise voters and to cause a whole lot of problem for the administration of elections is an excellent question. And that, as a procedural matter, should be enough to kill these lawsuits. I suspect, as I said, that this will be enough to kill these lawsuits, as well as probably the Republican National Committee doesn't understand the law, so they may be wrong on the merits as well. But it should be enough to kill these cases at the trial court level. The question is whether a hyper-partisan state Supreme Court, which there have been indications of, jury's out, but there have been indications that this state Supreme Court is that way, given how they ruled in some other cases, whether they will look the other way or whether they also will uphold those principles now that, it is Republicans who are rushing in at the last minute.
We'll keep a close eye on North Carolina and keep y'all updated on these cases. Now, over in Michigan, Republicans have filed a new lawsuit in Wayne County, where Detroit is, saying that the county has hired many more Democratic poll workers than Republican poll workers.
Yeah, so the Republicans have been targeting Wayne County all the way back since the 2020 election, right? Wayne County, people need to remember, is the home county of Detroit. And A lot of the lying that Rudy Giuliani and others did in the post-election in 2020 was aimed at Wayne County. The first effort to get a Republican local election officials to refuse to certify an election result was in Wayne County. And that effort was spearheaded by the President of the United States himself, Donald Trump, who was sitting in the Oval Office calling these local election officials, urging them not to certify the election results in Wayne County. On the phone with him was Ronna McDaniel, the then chairwoman of the National Republican Party. So that's how seriously they were about this in 2020. Well, they haven't given up their attacks on Wayne County. The Republicans have been obsessed with how do they try to keep voting totals down in Detroit? How do they try to make it harder to vote in Detroit? How do they try to frustrate the ability for people to be able to cast their ballots? And they have seized now, again, another place where they've seized on this sort of at the last minute, after a lot of time went by, they have seized on the fact that there aren't Republican election inspectors, as they call them. These are just the election workers. There aren't that many of them. It's a overwhelmingly Democratic city, and there were only 310 Republican election workers compared to over 2,000 in the August primary. And they are now claiming that is the basis for a lawsuit, with God knows what remedy they have in mind. Well, God knows, and I know, and Paige, you know what their remedy is.
Right. Michigan law says that counties should try to have an equal number of Democratic and Republican poll workers, election inspectors, as they're called in Michigan, at each precinct. But the reality is that there are just a lot more Democrats in Wayne County, in Detroit, than Republicans.
Yeah, and there are a lot more Democrats who want to be local election workers. Think about it. If you are a Republican in Wayne County, all you've heard for 4 years are lies. All you've heard for 4 years is that the Wayne County elections are corrupt and things were done wrong in Detroit and everything's rigged and, all of the nonsense that Donald Trump has spewed, all of the hate and bile that the Republican National Committee has spread about Wayne County. Of course, that's going to affect how many registered Republicans want to work at the polls in Wayne County. Why would they want to work there if they were told by their political party that it was this cesspool of corruption, that it was all rigged? And so what's happened is Republicans are reaping what they've sown, right? They are essentially now, they don't have enough people who want to work the polls. And I suspect, by the way, this is not just a Wayne County, Michigan problem. I mean, why would Republicans want to work the polls or work at absentee ballot, processing facilities, for example, in other states, right? The big lie has been so damaging to the health of our civic spirit in this country and to democracy in ways that people don't even think about it. We talk about it in terms of election deniers wanting to get into these offices, but we forget how much of a negative it has been for good people of both political parties, of Republicans in Wayne County, who might have before wanted to be part of this process, but who have now been so lied to and so vilified over time that they've gotten out. So that's the state, that's the reality that the Republicans have dug them holes. So now they filed this lawsuit and they claim that what they really want is more Republicans hired. But we'll wait and see. I have a deep-seated suspicion that what they really want is fewer polls. They just want fewer Democrats. They want there to be, if they can't find enough people, they say they submitted 600. Well, that's still not 2,000, right? That they're going to want to even this out by firing trained workers, firing volunteers who have gone through all of the proper procedures and vetting or whatever else they go through in Detroit, and it will lead to less well-administered elections, and it may lead to fewer polling places. So that's what I think they're up to here, and they're not going to get away with it.
Now in Michigan, election inspectors are selected either by applying directly to the county to be an election inspector or through a nomination list from a county of political parties. Like you said, the Wayne County GOP says that they submitted over 600 names to be Republican election inspectors for the August primary. But like we talked about in North Carolina, they would have known well before the August primary that they did not see the number of Republican poll workers that they wanted to be hired. They would have known before the August primary that there would be more Democratic poll workers than Republican poll workers. So why wait weeks after the primary to file this lawsuit? And again, just 2 months before the general election to try to fix an issue that they have now known about for months.
And again, it's because the Republicans don't want there to be smooth administration of elections generally. Now, they specifically don't want there to be smooth administration of elections in Detroit. Like, their hostility to Detroit is well known. I mean, Donald Trump lies about Detroit all the time. Donald Trump lies about a lot of major cities, but one of those is Detroit. So there's a genuine hostility there, and no one should think that this lawsuit is any effort to help Detroit run their elections. No one should think that this is any effort to help Detroit, have more election workers or people have more confidence in the outcome of elections. This is about as cynical a ploy of a lawsuit as we see. And believe me, at Democracy Docket, they see a lot of cynical ploys of lawsuits. I mean, they are tracking Paige, over 700 lawsuits?
We're tracking over 800 lawsuits in our case database now. And like we just saw a group of Republican attorneys generals file a brief in the U.S. Supreme Court asking SCOTUS to rule that Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act is either unconstitutional or non-justiciable. So we're seeing a lot of craziness in courts from Republicans, from Republican lawmakers, Republican parties, Republican officials. It's madness.
It is Monday, the 9th of September of 2024, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English Bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef, and we will be seating you directly for our especially special, daily special, River City Ash Mondays. That's right. A little hesitation there, I know. Well, it is Monday after all. That's the excuse that is, well, for du jour. For sure. It's today. For today. We use today as the excuse. And sometimes people use Wednesday, hump day. Okay? Because you're over the hump. Don't think lascivious thoughts, please. Anyway, how are you? We made it through a weekend, and we have the debate coming up, which is wonderful. Still mourning little Precious passing last week on Wednesday. So, yeah, she was a cute little thing, and we had her as our door girl for quite a while, too. It is a little difficult to not include her in the morning lineup. Is that what it is? Well, we love her, and she got a bad disease, and we didn't want her to suffer. Unfortunately, the suffering was mitigated and very short, so that was good. Okay, so what else has been happening? We still have an election coming up, and boy, do people need to register to vote, because if 7 million, if you're winning by 7 to 8 million, and they call that by a whisker, Jesus Christ. Yeah, and yet, they can manipulate a few hundred votes here and there in counties, and that seems to be okay. Oh, that's a landslide. Just you watch. They're doing it now. They're not only playing the refs. Yeah, well, some of those folks, the hoi polloi of their movement, haven't quite gotten the word that some of their vaunted, well, there's no other word to put it, influencers are, rusky plants. There are quite a few people who have actually professed publicly that they would prefer Russia to this deep state run by, well, black people, brown people, women of every color, but women especially. Well, let's be clear, especially black women. That's the thing that they can't stand the most. That's why old Trump was so confused. He says, well, I could almost get along with someone if they're Indian, but they're black. No way. And all of a sudden she turned black. Who ever heard of her being black? What a racist pig. Misogynist, racist pigs. I had a bit of a tete-a-tete with, if you listened to the Tim Corrimal show earlier today, and you'll be able to listen to it later on, but do get the podcast. I had made mention of who I call locally around here the usual suspects, the usual MAGA suspects. And there's a coterie of them who insistently or consistently post, well, shall we say, inflammatory, poke in the eye type things, and then claim that, oh, there's no liberals around here, you're the only one. And yet they're being bombarded finally by fellow like-minded Democratic voters. By dint of the fact that we are Democratic voters, that means we're Marxist voters. Well, I have noticed that in some of the back and forth in which I have brought up actual, well, shall we say, treasonous acts by Republican administrations within our lifetimes, because these people, let's be clear, are our age. Somehow, I don't know, they got the bad acid. What the hell happened? Were they left alone with some bad acid and they had to deal with it themselves, and they had no capability, no background, no grounding in which to be able to claim that what they were seeing was not really what they were seeing? Just give it some time, it'll pass. They were never taught that, apparently, and here we are. So, bringing up little facts like Trump violating the Logan Act by negotiating with, whomever, Bibi, Hamas, to quash the hostage exchange. Oh, yeah. That was brought up like, oh, yeah, you guys are real good at hostage exchanges. Like this effer knows anything about hostage negotiations and what it takes and how long and how it can be effed up by people like Donald Trump passing edicts from his little palace there at Mar-a-Lago as if he is the leader of the free world. Bullshit. But when I made mention that Donald Trump is doing something very similar, if not exactly the same, that Republican administrations have done previous to become Republican administrations in spite of the law, from Nixon effing up the Paris Peace Accords, Reagan messing up with the Iran hostage crisis. Shall I go on? Well, I have noticed those folks who I had that tete-a-tete have deleted or removed those posts, those conversations. Within the text, the body of a larger post, these are like replies. And this has been happening all through the weekend. Bringing up Project 2025, that gets X'd out. They don't want people who don't know about Project 2025 to learn about it now. Even at the expense of pulling back a post where they were just so gleeful in calling me a commie, etc., etc., etc. It actually started when I asked one fellow who called me a commie and a Marxist, etc., 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 to actually define what communism is and what are my means of production. Well, he wasn't able to answer that. He was complaining about ad hominems while they're calling me a commie Marxist. Oh, you're a Marxist voter because you're a Democratic voter. We can't wait until we win so we can get rid of you people. I mean, come on. And then they accused me of promoting some sort of violent confrontation because this guy, one of these guys, is just throwing the mother effing bombs. Mother effer. That's when I got a little involved. I wasn't even going to involve myself in this particular post. Oh, it was a general post about registering to vote. Oh, my. Whenever there is a post, generally about go out and register to vote, it's our civic duty as Americans, we have these MAGA Nazis complaining. And then, when they start dropping the big mother effing bombs because they don't give an F about our feelings, we have to give an F about their feelings. You're not supposed to talk back is basically what their argument is. Because they're so used to, well, weak-kneed liberals of the past acquiescing to their every demand. Oh, here, I'll just go slink in a corner. You can do whatever you want to do. No more, mofo. You want to drop some mother effing bombs? I am your huckleberry. That was construed as a call for a fight. What is it about these eliminationists that whenever you just verbally confront them, literally confront them, they think that you're perpetuating violence upon their body? While at the same time saying that we can't wait till we can kick your door down and take you out. Well, my response to that is, well, you can try. We're not hippies you can kick. We are punks and we kick back. Get used to it. They are weird. There's no getting around it. There's a certain joy in exposing their weird and letting them expose their weird on their own. It's joyful, viewing it, experiencing it. So, I just think that maybe there's two ways to look at these deletions of posts in which we have brought up, well, the facts. And that is, they don't know what to do without this Russian influence campaign helping them out. And all they've got is that Merrick Garland and the DOJ is the deep state, so you can't trust them. Yeah, all right. Deep state this, pal. You know, it really does bother me. Just coming back from my father's military funeral, and I'm with, well, there were about 300-400 people at my dad's service there at the Riverside Veterans Cemetery. And I was thinking, these are all Soviet fighters. The old Soviet fighters from back in the day. Lots of them got jobs in academia. In various disciplines. Not just Russian. I'm just saying. These were fighters against socialism and Marxism and communism. And I'll be damned if I let a bunch of MAGA Nazis who don't know shit about America, its politics, what the rules are, making up their own rules and saying they're the true Americans. F you, pal. True American? What is that? I'll tell you. One who is a true neighbor, as was expressed at my father's military service, because his colleagues and dear best friends ran the gamut of the political spectrum. They weren't in a silo. They were arguing Trump's side in many cases. But apparently these fellows, these old Soviet fellows, and gals, let's be clear, these old Soviet fighters recognized we were all in this together. And we better damn well be aware when there's an influence campaign upon our character, upon our understanding. The idea is to be able to recognize it, marshal your forces, and kick the goddamn propagandists to the curb. I mean, we're Americans. You don't take the other side or use it as an excuse. Oh, well, you're the deep state. You're the elite. F you, pal. Well, I guess I must seem very elitist to them. Excuse me. I guess it was elitist of me to go out and take on the most menial jobs. Because I thought that in America you weren't so proud that you would turn down a job just because it was beneath you. Royals do that. And I'll be damned also if I'm going to take the advice of Winston Churchill over Robert Frost. We had a revolution against the Brits. I'll take the Americans' advice. Thank you very much. Okay. We were patriots long before they co-opted the term. Okay? Let's be clear about that. And that is also a Russian influence campaign. Anybody who believes that Donald Trump is a masculine fellow, I don't know. That's Russian brainwashing by definition. Come on. Alrighty. Well, I went on and on and on there. It's Monday, isn't it? Let us give you a rundown of what we have in store for you because we don't have much time. Well, that was Mark Elias at the top. Thank God for Democracy Docket because, you know, this guy's going to be one of the first thrown into the camps if this other guy is able to wrest control of our great United States of America. We cannot let it happen. On the rest of the menu, speaking of which, in terms of opponents to Donald Trump's authoritarian rule, the ACLU plans to spend $1.3 million to educate Montana voters about their Supreme Court candidates. Casino company Wynn Resorts Limited has agreed to pay $130 million to federal authorities and admit it laundered international money to its gamblers at its flagship Las Vegas property on the Strip, by the way. And star Miami wide receiver Tyreek Hill was violently detained by police before the Dolphins game yesterday, Sunday, with one officer subsequently placed on administrative leave. They act with impunity, even though there's hundreds, if not more, cell phone cameras taping it as it was happening. Unbelievable. After the break, we moved to the chef's table where Turkish President Erdogan vowed to purge military graduates who took an oath to defend, quote, a secular democratic Turkey. An oath that was discontinued from the academy in 2022. Who was president then? Let's guess. And opposition candidate and presidential winner Edmundo Gonzalez was forced to flee Venezuela by the Maduro regime for asylum in Spain. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. We now, as usual, have spent so much time at the top. Let us now tuck into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. It is out of the Associated Press with Amy Beth Hansen penning the piece. The American Civil Liberties Union plans to spend $1.3 million on campaign advertising to educate Montana voters about where state Supreme Court candidates stand on abortion and other civil rights issues with a measure constitutionally protecting abortion access also on the ballot. The expenditure comes after Republicans tried unsuccessfully in 2022 to unseat a justice by making an unprecedented partisan endorsement of her challenger. GOP lawmakers also argue that the Supreme Court has been legislating from the bench and blocking laws to restrict abortion access to make it more difficult to vote. Oh, the Nazis just hate it when the courts rule against them, don't they? Well, with politicians passing increasingly extreme laws, including abortion restrictions and bans, voters have the opportunity to elect justices who will protect fundamental rights in the state from these attacks. The National ACLU and the ACLU of Montana said in a statement on Thursday last. I want to interject here real quick. The usual suspects, MAGA suspects here in sundown town, Southern Oregon, call the ACLU commie. Of course they would. Well, state Supreme Court candidates cannot seek, accept, or use partisan endorsements, and the ACLU of Montana said it was not endorsing any candidates, even though the Republicans blatantly did. Well, the ACLU wants to make sure voters know where Supreme Court candidates stand on those issues so that they can cast an informed ballot this November, an ACLU spokesperson said. The $1.3 million is the most the ACLU has spent on a Montana election. Spokesperson Andrew Everett interjected. The ACLU is also spending money on Supreme Court races in Arizona, Michigan, Ohio, and North Carolina. Ken Ritter at the weekend desk of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays. Casino company Wynn Resorts has agreed to pay $130 million to federal authorities and admit it let unlicensed money transfer businesses around the world to funnel funds to gamblers at its flagship Las Vegas Strip property. That's a roundabout way of saying they laundered international mob money. The publicly traded company said a non-prosecution settlement was reached on Friday that represented a monetary figure identified by the U.S. Justice Department as funds involved in the transaction at issue at the Wynn Las Vegas Resort. In statements to the media and to the Federal Securities and Exchange Commission, the company said the forfeiture wasn't a fine, and findings in the decade-long case did not amount to money laundering. Oh, that's a nice way of apologizing. U.S. Attorney Tara McGrath in San Diego said the settlement showed that casinos are accountable if they let foreign customers evade U.S. laws. She said $130 million was believed to be the largest forfeiture by a casino based on admissions of criminal wrongdoing. Just don't call it money laundering. The Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Tyreek Hill of the Miami Dolphins was handcuffed and placed face down on a street outside the team's stadium after he was stopped for speeding and reckless driving yesterday, Sunday morning. Before the Dolphins' first game of the season, an incident that left the star wide receiver baffled and resulted in a police officer being placed on administrative leave. There's actually no proof that he was speeding and driving recklessly. Video of the incident kind of prove otherwise, but we'll continue here. The officer, who was not identified because, hey, implied immunity, right? Was one of at least 3 involved in detaining Hill. Some fans saw Hill being handcuffed and captured video on their way to the game, and it quickly went viral on social media. Yeah, well, it was scores, if not 100 or more. Miami-Dade Police Director Stephanie V. Daniels said she had launched an internal affairs investigation, told after the game that the officer was placed on leave pending the outcome of the investigation. Tyreek Hill said, "That should tell you everything you need to know." Well, it does. Added defensive tackle Calais Campbell, who was also briefly handcuffed after coming to his teammates' aid, said that makes sense based on the situation. Hill, who said he respects police officers and wants to be one when he retires from football, said he had no idea why police placed him in handcuffs. Well, we do. And he does as well. But he's being deferential. "I wasn't disrespectful because my mom didn't raise me that way," Hill said. "Didn't cuss. Didn't do none of that. Like I said, I'm still trying to figure it out, man." Hill, who is black, said he didn't want to use a celebrity to get out of the situation, but wondered what would have happened if he were not an NFL star. "I don't want to bring race into it, but sometimes it gets kind of iffy when you do," he said. "What if I wasn't Tyreek Hill? Lord knows what that guy or guys would have done. I was just making sure that I was doing what my uncle always told me to do whenever you're in a situation like that. Just listen. Put your hands on the steering wheel and just listen." I'll leave it at that. Let us now go to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. This week, TV's everywhere. The long-awaited and delayed adaptation of Colleen Hoover's 2016 novel It Ends With Us is out. The pandemic, Hollywood strikes, and disputes between director, co-star Jason Baldini, and producer and co-star Blake Lively led to the delays for the project, which was birthed in 2019 when Baldini optioned the adaptation. The final cut of the picture is reportedly one commissioned by Lively. As news of problems on the set started to leak, Baldini hired a PR crisis manager. So what's the result? Well, it's a film that fans of the novel, and more broadly those looking for a sensitive and real-world depiction of domestic violence, are finding satisfying. A certain review aggregator is finding well over 90% positive viewer response. That isn't stopping reviewers from finding fault, of course. The setting's Boston, a huge city, and the number of coincidental relationships that make the plot work seem a tad contrived from the get-go. But that's forgivable if other things work, and they usually do, at least to the extent that you're kept engaged by, say, the roots of Baldini's character Kyle's rage, or whether Lively's Lily has seen it all before. The character who represents Lily's alternative experience, Atlas, Brandon Sklar, seems a bit of a foil. The dialogue dialogue, with one important scene reportedly written by Lively's real-life husband Ryan Reynolds, is uneven, but does have its moments. This one has the look and feel of a rom-com. The characters are stylish, poverty's not one of their problems, and then there's the soundtrack, all of which either say, yeah, DV happens here too, or is just inappropriate. The conclusion's a cut above a Lifetime series, showing some reflection and self-awareness, but leaves you wondering if it really ends with us. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. Catch up with us at take2moviereview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
You're listening to the American Democracy Minute, keeping your government by and for the people. The U.S. Census Bureau reports that 69.1% of Americans were registered to vote for the 2022 midterms, the highest number in over 2 decades. To register the other 30%, National Voter Registration Day is September 17th, and organizers hope community groups will help. Democracy reforms in pro-voter states like online voter registration and automatic voter registration at the DMV have helped to raise the number of those registered. But Pew Research found that 62% of unregistered voters had never been asked to register. Among minority communities, 64.1% of black voters were registered, 59.9% of Asian voters, and 57.8% of Hispanics. National Voter Registration Day is a project sponsored by the U.S. Election Assistance Commission and the National Associations of Election Officials, State Election Directors, and Secretaries of State, and scores of nonprofit, civic, and corporate organizations. The event is intended to drive unregistered citizens to local city and county election offices or to voter registration drive locations like libraries, schools, food pantries, and other key locations where allowed. Organizations wishing to participate and help register their fellow Americans are encouraged to visit nationalvoterregistrationday.org, and we've linked it from americandemocracyminute.org. I'm Brian Beal.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1924. 16 striking Filipino sugar workers on the Hawaiian island of Kauai were killed by police. This incident is known as the Hanapipi Massacre. Filipinos began immigrating to Hawaii to work on the sugar plantations around 1906. By 1924, there were nearly 50,000 Filipino workers. In 1919, Pablo Manlipit organized the Filipino Labor Union and started recruiting Filipino workers from the Hawaiian sugar plantations. The Hawaiian Territorial Legislature passed an anti-picketing law in 1923. Picketers could receive up to 10 years in prison. In 1924, Manlipit led an 8-month strike of plantation workers on Kauai. Workers demanded $2 a day in wages and an 8-hour workday. The plantation owners brought in scab labor. They also used armed forces and spies to crush the strike. Plantation owners turned workers out of their homes, and on this day, the police, armed with clubs and guns, came to the union's headquarters. They claimed to be looking for 2 scab laborers they thought were being held prisoner by the union. Filipino strikers were armed only with homemade weapons and knives and a few guns. The Associated Press wrote, 20 persons dead, unnumbered injured lying in hospital. Officers under orders to shoot strikers as they approach. 16 of the dead were strikers, and 4 were police. After the massacre, police arrested 101 male protesters. 60 received received 4-year jail sentences. Manlipit was sentenced to 10 years. Others claimed he had been framed and that witnesses had been promised $10,000 to lie during the trial. He was then paroled on the condition that he leave Hawaii. 3 months after the massacre, the strike disintegrated. In 2006, the mayor of Hanapipi and Filipino community leaders dedicated a concrete marker honoring the 16 Filipinos who died during the massacre.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy River City Hash Mondays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, because there's lots more of us where we come from. Well, it is currently 58 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting highs nearly the same as what we had yesterday, which was and will be in the mid to upper 90s. Winds out of the west-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Clear to partly cloudy overnight with lows in the upper 50s. Winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. And then a few passing clouds tomorrow, otherwise generally sunny with highs in the upper 80s. Winds out of the west-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour, bringing with it quite a bit of rain on Wednesday, forecasting a quarter to a half inch of rain, with more coming on the weekend. So we actually look forward to that. Looks like ragweed pollen is rated moderate here in our town of Rogue River, and boy, something hit me. The air quality index for the region is also moderate at 79 parts per million. And that daytime UV index is at a high for the fall at level 6. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 29.93 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles. And relative humidity is at 84%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world, and that is the Weather Underground. London is 62 degrees and cloudy. Paris is 64 and cloudy. Rome is 82 and partly cloudy with a thunderstorm advisory. Kabul is 72 and clear. Hong Kong is 90 degrees and fair with a thunderstorm advisory. Tokyo is 80 degrees and mostly cloudy. Auckland, New Zealand is 60 degrees and partly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 58 and mostly cloudy. Chicago, Illinois is 68 and sunny. And New York, New York is 68 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Gunnar Kuiper at the Associated Press World Desk, as Gunnar, our snoozing sous chef, is doing his job quite loudly, as he's been hired to do in the background. Well, Gunnar Kuiper brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The Turkish president has hit out at military graduates who took a pro-secular oath during their graduation ceremony, promising that those behind it would be purged from the military. Speaking at a conference for Islamic schools in the northwestern city of Kocaeli on Saturday, Erdogan described those involved as opportunists. He added that an investigation was underway and vowed that the few impertinent individuals responsible will be purged. Whoever they are, it is not possible for them to be part of our military, Erdogan said. Now, I wonder what the EU says. Erdogan was present at the graduation ceremony at the Turkish Military Academy in Ankara on August 30th. Valedictorian Ebru Igalu told the 960-strong graduating class in reciting the official military oath about defending Turkey. But video footage from about an hour later shows about 400 of the graduates gathered in a field, raising their swords and chanting, "We are soldiers of Mustafa Kemal," a reference to the secular founder of modern Turkey, Mustafa Kemal Ataturk. Oh, well, he's enemy number one to Erdogan. Erdogan then led the group in the officer's oath in which they vowed to defend a, quote, secular, democratic Turkey. That oath was discontinued from the academy in 2022. Turkey has become more overtly religious under Erdogan, speaking of opportunists, shedding some of the secularist traditions from the original Ataturk Republic. Or is it Kabbalist? Turkey's military has traditionally viewed itself as the guarantor of secularism, which has resulted in a series of coups. It led 3 takeovers between 1960 and 1980 and toppled a conservative government in 1997. However, in 2016, an attempt to overthrow Erdogan and his religious conservative administration was foiled, and thousands of people were purged from the armed forces, the judiciary, and other public institutions. Sound familiar? Jorge Rueda, Joshua Goodman, and Joseph Wilson of the Associated Press World Desk brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays. Former Venezuelan presidential candidate Edmundo Gonzalez arrived in Spain yesterday, Sunday, after fleeing into exile as part of a negotiated deal with Nicolas Maduro's government that dealt a major blow to millions who placed their hopes in his opposition campaign. The surprise departure of the man considered by Venezuela's opposition and several foreign governments to be the legitimate winner of the July 28 presidential election was announced late Saturday by Venezuelan officials who just a few days ago ordered his arrest. Gonzalez landed at a military airport near Madrid, accompanied by his wife and Spanish officials. Hours later, he sent a short voice message to supporters, thanking them for their support. Opposition leader Maria Corina Machado tried to put a positive spin on his departure, assuring Venezuelans the 75-year-old retired diplomat would be back on January 10th for a swearing-in ceremony marking the start of the next presidential term. His life was in danger, and the increasing threats, summons, arrest warrants, and even attempts at blackmail and coercion to which he had been subjected demonstrate that the regime has no scruples, Machado said. Let this be clear to everyone. Edmundo will fight from outside alongside our diaspora. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here tomorrow for Terrytown Chowder Tuesdays, so do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we will meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.